So before I do introduce the second session, I want to let you know that the final activity of the day, an hour from now, will be breakout sessions with today's speakers. You will be able to interact directly with them and go into more detail, following up on their conversations, asking more questions, and you'll be able to move freely between the breakout session rooms and ask questions with your webcam and mic on, or continue via chat. So please take a moment just to look at this slide and see the room list here, the speakers from the first session that we just finished and this upcoming session. The speakers from the first session we've just finished will be in rooms 1 and 2, and this upcoming session that we're about to introduce will be in rooms 3, 4, and 5. So with that, we can move on, and I'm very happy to introduce our moderator, who will discuss the Canadian, French, and German funding opportunities with the great slate of speakers. So Julio Sevilla, thank you so much for being here. You are the International Projects Manager at Concordia University in Montreal. We appreciate you being here and look forward to hearing from the next speakers.
Thank you for the introduction, Jason. Can you hear me? Is it clear? Perfect. Well, thank you also to EURAXESS and Simon Fraser University, first for inviting me to moderate this panel, and second for proposing such a timely and important topic. The title of our session today is National Funding Opportunities, and the objective is to learn about calls for funding to promote collaborations between Canada and Europe. In particular, collaborations between Canada and France and Canada and Germany. In that regards, last year, Science Business conducted a survey on the importance of international collaborations. 3/4 of the respondents, which included universities and research organizations, said that global collaboration in research was vital for the future of their organization and for the future of the world. Also, in the same survey, the vast majority of the respondents identifying the lack of funding as the main obstacle for international collaboration. We are sharing the link of this survey in the chat box in case you're interested to learn more about this survey. Today, we're delighted to have among our speakers 4 organizations that are precisely trying to break down the obstacles of lack of funding, and are also promoting collaborations between Canada and France and Canada and Germany. With that, I would like to introduce our speakers for our session today. I will ask you to please turn on your camera as I mention your name. First, we have Mr. Brian Calacula, who's an international partnership officer with Mitacs. Welcome, Brian. We also have John Paul Kleiner, who's a senior manager with the German Academic Exchange Services, known as DAAD. We also welcome Dr. Clotilde Ribaud, who's the administrator of the France-Canada Research Fund. And she's also responsible for administrating the France-Canada Innovation Platform. She is with the Vice President Research Office at the University of Ottawa. And last but not least, we welcome Dr. Jan Mitacs, representative of the Satellite Office of the French National Center for Scientific Research, Université de Lyon in Canada. It's representing CNRS. Before we start with our first presentation, we have a couple of logistic announcements. In terms of the structure of this session, we will have 3 presentations of 15 minutes each, followed by a 10-minute question and answer period. If needed, I will let you know when I will let know the presenters when you're getting to the end of your presentation, so you can conclude your presentations. We welcome and encourage you to send us your questions by using the chat box on the side menu of the screen. And if you'd like to know more about the speakers' bios, please consult the program, which should be in the chat box in your screen. Finally, I would like to remind you that this session will be recorded. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Brian Calacula from Mitacs, to start his presentation. Brian, the floor is yours.
Julio, I'll just thank you very much for the warm introduction to our great set of speakers here. We'll go ahead and start with John Paul Kleiner, and then from there move back to Brian towards the end. So thank you so much to both of you. Looking forward to this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the opportunity here. First of all, I'd like to thank EURAXESS and SFU for the invitation to DAAD to take part here today. Good to see you again, Julio, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to join us here. So I am John Paul Kleiner. I'm with the German Academic Exchange Service, and let me just share my screen with you here. All right. If I could get some indication that this is sharing properly, that would be helpful. Yes? I am proceeding on the hopeful assumption that that is the case.
We can see
so, yes?
So we can see your presentation. If you switch back to the Hopin platform, I think it will cause some issues where it's trying to share that.
And I'll just stay here.
Okay, well, great. We can hear you great too. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Jackson. All right, so just to give you a sense of what I have in mind here today, for our time right now, I'm going to present some information on the German research landscape itself, some facts, figures, some structures, information on the major players. And then for my breakout session, I will present individual funding opportunities from our organization, DAAD, but from a number of other German partners. So, of course, I'll have time to answer your questions then as well. So, in terms of facts and figures, so there are nearly 1,000 publicly funded research institutions in Germany. Those public funds come from two levels of government, the federal authorities and the Länder or provincial authorities. To give you a sense of the priority that R&D investment has inside of Germany, in 2019, the volume of investment eclipsed 100 billion euros, which corresponds to just over 3% of GDP. This is a volume that has been quite stable over the last number of years and is in fact increasing with the goal of hitting 3.5% by 2025. To give a bit of context for that level of investment, at present the European average, I believe, is around 2%. Canada comes in slightly under that. So it's a very important area of investment and activity in Germany. As you might expect, an investment of that volume has considerable knock-on effect in terms of employment. Nearly 700,000 Germans find work in the R&D sector. And if one had to characterize research in Germany, one of the things you would point to was certainly the very highly collaborative nature of that activity. It is not unusual for research activities there to be done with European partners on a bilateral or multilateral basis, and of course beyond as well. Germany has agreements for science and technology with more than 155 countries, including Canada, and that's the basis on which this type of activity takes place. In terms of where this investment is spent, it's important to emphasize, I think, that over 2/3 of that is spent in what they call here the business enterprise sector, so the private sector, and approximately 1/3 is spent inside the public sector. So these would be research institutions that are directly overseen by governments, so state governments or the federal government, or in the higher education sector, so universities and what they call the non-university research institutions. Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research has, of course, outlined some key objectives for its research policies, and I'll touch on these here. Number one, it's important to provide funding for future-oriented issues, and I'll go into a little more detail on those in the next slide. There's a commitment to cultivating an approach where all participants in the network are involved, so more inputs leads to better outputs, and creating an innovation-friendly research environment, so supporting startups and scientific spin-offs in particular. There's also an understanding that providing researchers with good working conditions and indeed living conditions is an important part of this whole equation. Indeed, our organization DAAD is directly involved in that work, as are a number of other German organizations I'll be introducing you to here today. And of course, internationality is built into the objectives from the outset, and we will see that with the programs that I'm presenting here today. I mentioned these fields of future relevance. There are 5 broad theme areas that have been identified for priority investment. Number 1, health and care. 2, sustainability, climate protection and energy. 3, mobility, in particular sustainable mobility. 4, urban and rural living, equal chances, so creating equal opportunities for citizens regardless of where they live. And then safety and security. So these are the 5 priority fields or areas, but I would like to emphasize that in addition to funds earmarked for these specific areas, there are funds and programs to support research across the disciplinary spectrum. So if you don't see your work reflected here, rest assured there are other means and ways of support for you and your question. Another key aspect of Germany's research policy is the so-called excellence strategy. So this was a program brought to life in the mid-2000s in cooperation between the federal government and the state governments. The idea here was to support Germany's world-class research entities, particularly those based at universities, with an eye to making them stronger, increasing their profile internationally, and thereby increasing Germany's attractiveness for international scholars. The program was renewed on an open-ended basis several years ago and now sees an annual investment of over €500 million per year. These funds are used for 2 program lines. First of all, there's the so-called excellence clusters. So these funds go to a university or universities that are working in partnership on a specific research question and have established themselves among the world leaders in that area. Funds go to them to support the continued pursuit of that research activity, but also to support the development of graduate level teaching programs to bring in the best students in Germany, but also from across the globe. And then the second line of funding goes for the so-called universities of excellence. So these are institutions which are home to more than one of these clusters of excellence, and it provides additional funding to strengthen those sites, their profile, and hence attractiveness for foreign scholars as well. So this is a way of saying it's spending some time to look into what those clusters of excellence are, and there are quite a number, as you can see on this map, finding what those research questions are, seeing if there are fits, and approaching them is a good idea because they typically have money set aside for international partnerships and building those links, so might be worth looking into. In terms of the pillars of the German research sector, there are 3. The first are the universities, the higher education institutions. The second are the non-university research institutes, which I will introduce to you at the end of this presentation. And then third, alluded to earlier, the industrial research sector, so the private sector, very important, not the focus of this presentation. I'm looking at the public aspect of this, so those are the first 2 pillars. German university system, as you probably are all well aware, highly developed, over 400 institutions of higher education, 156 of those are authorized to issue doctoral degrees. Nearly 3 million students studying at those institutions, about 14% are from abroad, a considerable number and one that has only gotten larger in recent years. Over 20,000 international students are pursuing their PhD in Germany, and in recent years Germany has established itself as the 4th most popular destination worldwide for international students. It is the most popular of the non-English speaking countries in terms of study destination. And lest one think that this mobility is all one way, no, of course, German students are highly mobile. Nearly 40% of them graduate from their German degree having had a significant international experience as part of that. And the German schools and governments are working to hit 50%, a very ambitious target. So there's a lot of reasons why this is possible, Erasmus, of course, being one of them, but German students are highly mobile. In terms of the two institutional types, this graphic gives you a sense of where their sort of mandates lie. On the right-hand side, we have what's labeled the university. So these are typically the institutions that marry teaching and research at their institution. They are able to issue, of course, bachelor and master's degrees, but also doctoral degrees. And then there are the universities of applied sciences, and as the name would suggest, the focus here is very much on applied education. These institutions are typically highly integrated into the local economy, educating students for roles with local employers. Often the study programs are conceived of in partnership with those employers, so it's a very applied focus. They're able to issue bachelor and master's degrees, but only in the rarest of cases, doctoral degrees. And finally, the big four. So these are the non-university research institutes. You will know some of the names. The Max Planck Society is made up of 86 different institutes that work across the disciplinary spectrum. Max Planck is probably best known, though, for its work in the life sciences and the natural sciences, and Max Planck is really the home of basic research in Germany. Its yearly budget, nearly 2 billion euros, and they have 15,000 researchers working at those 86 institutes, over half of whom are from abroad. It's important to note that researcher in Germany denotes any scholar from the doctoral student level upward, and that helps contribute to this very high percentage. Max Planck offers teaching programs at the doctoral level that have high degree of participation from abroad. You'll see at the bottom here I've included the website for the Max Planck, and for all of these so-called Big Four, they all have their own funding programs. I'll be touching on some of them in my presentation later, but it's worth spending some time checking out their websites because they have many opportunities that I simply won't have time to present here today. The second of the Big Four, I'll point out the second line here, 5 billion euro annual budget. So the volume here helps indicate to an extent the type of activity. These are the big questions facing humanity that the 19 research centers at the Helmholtz Association address. So we're talking about sustainability, questions of the environment, sustainable energy, human health, infectious disease, and the list goes on. 42,000 staff employed at those centers, over 7,000 are from abroad. The Leibniz Association is made up of 96 institutes, research libraries, and archives. They are perhaps best known internationally for the institutes working in the humanities and areas of the social sciences, but they also have a very strong mandate for knowledge mobilization, so taking the results of research work to decision makers, politicians, but also the general public, and informing them of these developments. Budget here, again, of nearly 2 billion euros, over 10,000 researchers employed at these institutes and other institutions, about a quarter of whom are from abroad. Last but certainly not least is the Fraunhofer Gesellschaft, or society. Fraunhofer is known as the home of applied research in Germany. It's made up of a network of 74 institutes, a number of which are now located outside of Germany. There are several here in Canada that have been set up in partnership with Canadian universities. And of their nearly 3 billion euro budget, about 3/4 of that is generated through contract research. 28,000 individuals find employment at these Fraunhofer institutes. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. Happy to answer questions later on during the question and answer period, and would invite those of you interested in learning more about the German funding opportunities to join me in my breakout room a little later.
Thank you for your presentation, Jean-Paul. It's great to see the variety of opportunities offered by the DAAD and Germany. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions from the audience by the end of the presentations. Now, this is in fact the good time. I invite our second speaker, Mr. Brian Calacula from Mitacs, to start his presentation. Brian, the floor is yours. Are you, okay, perfect. Now I see you. Good
Sorry
to see you.
technical glitches. Good to see you as well, Julio. So I'm going to go ahead and present and share my my screen here. Please let me know if you can see it okay. Any technical issues? Are we okay?
No, you're perfect, Brian.
Perfect.
We see your presentation.
Perfect. Well, so thank you again for this wonderful opportunity to present. My name is Brian Calacula. I'm the International Relations Officer of Mitacs, one of a few international officers, I should say. And I will be talking a little bit about Mitacs and the work that Mitacs does both in Canada and abroad. So one of the reasons why Mitacs exists is that we see currently an issue in Canada, which we've seen for a while, which is that Canada has actually very strong economic indicators. We have a solid foundation when it comes to our economy, but we also have quite a few challenges sort of translating these economic strength indicators into productivity and innovation. So as you can see from this graph very quickly, this is what we call the innovation paradox. You know, despite the strengths that we have, we're sort of dipping and we're below 90% of U.S. labor, which is sort of our biggest neighbor and comparison point from our Canadian perspective. And at the same time, even though we punch above our weight in terms of the university research development, a lot of these things don't get commercialized. And again, this is based on a report that we've had access to for many years and something that is not new within the Canadian innovation context. So it's, unfortunately, this is not just a Canadian issue. When you look at OECD averages on business expenditures and research development, a lot of countries are facing similar challenges and not just Canada. And so there are some solutions to this problem. And as we move towards digitization, automation, Canada is attempting to lead the way in capitalizing our advantage when it comes to innovative thinking, trying to create high-value specialized jobs, and to ensure that Canadians in particular have the skills and training to seize on these opportunities. The link, of course, to why I'm here today is that this approach requires both a symbiosis of the domestic approach with the international approach. And of course, that's what the relevance of today and why Mitacs is presenting. So we help achieve these goals by empowering research and development, fundamentally by connecting industry with the best post-secondary institutions in Canada and internationally. So we're funded by the federal and provincial governments in Canada, and we drive research and innovation by essentially connecting research networks to boost international collaboration, because we understand how important international collaboration is within the Canadian context, but also within global innovation ecosystems. And more importantly, we're also trying to nurture the next generation of graduate students so that they can have access to applying the skills that they've developed and the research they developed into industry research careers as well. And so if you just look very quickly at this slide, our impact has actually grown considerably from this slide. We're actually on track to do about 15,000 internships. We have partnerships with every major Canadian university. We have over 6,000 companies that work with Mitacs. We've been in operation for 20 years, and we've invested about $700 million in the last 10 years. So we've been quite busy on that front. But of course, this other side of the coin is the need to develop international partnerships, which is the role that I have at Mitacs. But again, why do we need international? We need to have a way to improve our productivity and support economic growth across the country, because Canada lacks the capacity to do this on its own. We have demographic challenges like a small population, an aging population, and we have a historic economic reliance on natural resources. The Canadian economy is also composed of primarily smaller companies, and so we need to be able to provide these companies with the opportunities to grow. And in order to do that, we have to internationalize Canada as much as possible. And our international programs have evolved over time to meet a range of these needs, because we see that the evolution of the Canadian innovation ecosystem is not static. And in order for Mitacs to continue to be relevant, we have to adapt to the changing dynamics of what we're seeing happen out. And obviously, COVID is one of those particular dynamics that we're experiencing in the last year. So our international approach is relatively simple. We promote and enable international research collaborations in every discipline with strategic partners by creating a bilateral mobility opportunity with that particular country. So we focus on ensuring that there's an exchange of talent and research between Canada and that particular country. And again, this has access to all our Canadian organizations. It has an ability to create economic output and increase competitiveness in Canada and of the partner as well. And we're expanding our research networks by bringing in additional networks into that relationship with Canada and with Mitacs. And we do this through a suite of programs that we've been actively running for at least 10 years and some actually for 20 years. So as a primary indicator, we have these 4 programs that have in some capacity the ability to connect these innovation ecosystems together. Accelerate, which is our flagship program, which Mitacs has been running for about 20 years now. It's the program that connects industrial partners with academic partners to actually exchange researchers from the academic sector into the industrial sector in the form of an internship. And then, of course, as the name indicates, Accelerate International is the international version of this program. We have a Global Link, which is a 2-way mobility program for the exchange of researchers from a Canadian university to an international university or vice versa. We can, of course, have the mobility go the other way around. And one of our most recent programs that we launched about a year ago is the Mitacs Entrepreneur International Program, which is essentially a commercialization program for startups to, at a Canadian incubator, to go abroad and connect with an international incubator to grow access to the local economy and to sort of have additional market access to those resources abroad as well. And so as I mentioned, we're on track to basically hit 15,000 internship units this year alone, which represents a commitment of about 140 million this past fiscal year. So Accelerate, again, this is sort of the Mitacs bread and butter. It's a research collaboration via internship model, so it's actually a student or a group of researchers that go and do a project with a company abroad. The funding can range from 1 unit of $15,000 to multi-million-dollar project with multiple researchers for multiple years. We support all disciplines and sectors. The application process is relatively easy. You can find information about it online, and the decision is turned around within 6 to 8 weeks. What makes Accelerate such an interesting program is that we also have a very high application success rate, and that doesn't mean that we just approve everybody, but our researchers and the business development team actually works with the applicant to ensure that what they submit is the most competitive application, and we actually then go back and help the applicant make edits to make sure that we can get that application peer-reviewed successfully as well. And of course, Accelerate International, as many of you astutely can observe, is the international version of this program. Again, same idea, $15,000 internship funding for a 4 to 6 month project, but it allows for mobility to happen between Canada and select international partners as well. So we can have a Canadian student go from Canada and work with an industry partner abroad doing a research project, or vice versa. We can have students from abroad coming to Canada, connecting with a Canadian company and doing a research project whilst under the supervision of Canadian professors as well. Mitacs Global Link is essentially the reason why I have a job at Mitacs. It comprises of 2-way mobility, research mobility between academic institutions in Canada and the partner countries that you see on the right as well. So we actually have co-funding arrangements between Canada and these group of countries on the right that allow for students to travel between the 2 countries. And that's the purpose of my job, is to basically go and find these partners in France, Germany, India, etc., that will contribute co-funding and access to their local innovation ecosystems and to the university ecosystems to connect academic researchers with one another and to submit these projects. If you look a little bit at the history of sort of the evolution of the Mitacs International footprint, we started in 2009 with approximately 17 students from India, and over the years, as you can see, we've grown our presence considerably. I mean, we've added Brazil a few years after that through the CAPES Science Without Borders program. We added China, and most recently we've added the UK as part of our UKRI collaboration, and I believe the most recent agreement that Mitacs signed this past summer was with Colombia. But what you're seeing here is essentially the evolution of the Mitacs footprint globally, where we started very humbly with partners in India supporting the best IIT students to come to Canada, and now we essentially have almost 17 partners that have joined Mitacs to work with us over the last decade, and so it's been a very impressive and a very time-consuming endeavor, as I'm sure all of you can imagine as well. But fundamentally, this entire process is supported by the framework that Mitacs strongly believes in, which is that this relationship and the connection with Canada is fundamentally based on talent, ideas, and network. We need to support talent. We need to support ideas that come from these talented individuals. And more importantly, we have to have a way that these networks can coexist together and collaborate with one another if we're going to make all of this possible. So Global Link has 3 suite of programs. And this is where I want to make sure I don't confuse the audience because we have a lot of programs at Mitacs. The Global Link Research Award is a program that a lot of the Canadian University network is familiar with. It allows for a researcher from a Canadian university to go abroad to another university for approximately 12 to 24 weeks to conduct a research project. And this project is supervised by both the Canadian home professor and the supervisor abroad as well. So it's a collaboration between the two professors, and the student is the conduit between those two professors who can do a research project, oftentimes affiliated with their degree or with their thesis. The Global Link Research Internship is a 12-week summer program where we bring talented students to Canada through a competition we run every year. And we have approximately 1,200 students that come to Canada. Obviously, we took a bit of a hit this year with COVID, but our hope is that we can continue to support higher numbers in a post-pandemic world as well. And of course, the Global Link Graduate Fellowship is a $15,000 grant that we provide to any students who comes back to Canada who participate in a Global Link Research Internship for full-time graduate studies. So if you had a Global Link Research Internship and you decide to come back to Canada to pursue your master's or PhD, Mitacs automatically provides you a $15,000 grant to pursue your studies in Canada if you so choose to come back. Finally, and this is going to be discussed in more detail with our group breakout session, but Mitacs has a collaboration right now with the European Commission to the MSCA RISE program, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about this as well in the breakout session, where we actually co-fund projects that have been selected through the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Program. So if every time MCSA runs a call, if there is a Canadian entity that has been selected successfully for a project, they can actually come to Mitacs and apply for additional funding in the amount of $6,000, and Mitacs will then provide additional funding to support researchers going from Canada to the EU as part of this global initiative that is being managed by the European Commission. And so you'll hear a little bit more about how this collaboration works. You'll hear a little bit more about the funding that's involved between the Canadian side and the European side. But fundamentally what this is essentially a joint initiative for Mitacs to be able to support Canadian researchers who would like to partake in this opportunity and that already, in fact, been selected as successful recipients of the European Commission opportunity to the MCSA RISE program. I went a little bit quickly because I had delayed everybody, so I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end of the session. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Brian. It's great to see all the different partnerships and connections developed by Mitacs to support international collaborations. You're making my role of moderator to be very easy because you're respecting your time. And we still have a third presentation. But before that, I would like to remind you that send us your questions by using the chat box in your menu and your screen. I would like to introduce our three third presenters. The third presentation. This presentation will be divided in two parts. During the first part, we will have Dr. Clotilde Ribaud from the France-Canada Research Fund. And during the second part, we will have Dr. Jan Mattes from the Satellite Office of CNRS, Université de Lyon in Canada. As expected, both presentations will focus on the relationship between Canada and France. Maybe you want to switch, start, I'm not sure who's going to start first, but Clotilde and Jan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio, for the kind introduction. So I will start sharing my screen first. Here. So thank you, EURAXESS and SFU, for inviting us and for promoting European research here in North America. So my name is Clotilde, and I'm going to introduce you to the France-Canada Research Fund. So the FCRF is a funding program from France and Canada, which supports a fundamental research project led by teams of researchers from the two countries. So the program is managed both by France and Canada, and it is working under a co-presidency where with Professor Rubihip from University of Ottawa is leading the Canada part, and Professor Jacques Samary from the University of Lyon represent France. And this program works for years now, thanks to a very strong collaboration between the French Embassy in Canada and the University of Ottawa. So 2020 is an anniversary year for us, and for 20 years of existence, the program supports more than 300 collaborative projects. So every year, at the beginning of September, we launch a call for proposal, and after a reviewing process, we support between 15 to 20 research projects up to $15,000. You must know that the funding is available for 2 years, and it is dedicated to cover mobility expenses. We do have some mandatory criteria to be eligible to our program. The first point, you need to know that both of the researcher must hold a tenure or a tenure track position within their research establishment, either in France or Canada. The second point is that the FCRF is here to promote new collaborations, which means that both of the researcher must engage in this international collaboration for the first time. Another point, which is an asset of our program, is that we are open to all research fields, and we are promoting for interdisciplinary research. Another mandatory criteria, if you are interested in applying to our program, is that you must involve young researcher, including master's, PhD student, or postdoctoral position. When it comes from researcher from France, you must know there are no restrictions. Researcher in France can come from any university, any research center or institution. If you are in Canada, you must know that researcher from Canada must be part of our consortium. So as you can see here on this map display, you can see that 20 universities coast to coast are members to our program. So as you can see, Simon Fraser University, for example, is a member, so any researcher from SFU can apply to our program. So because we are celebrating our 20th anniversary, we launched a survey at the beginning of the year among all the former laureates, so more than 600 researchers. And the results show that more than 90% of the researchers expressed high satisfaction with our program. But I think what is important for me here is that even if the FCRF is an initiation program promoting new collaboration and working for a 2-year program, it is important to notice that 86% of the researchers told us they are still collaborating with their French or Canadian partners. And this is definitely thanks to all the research program we have heard about the last 2 days. When it comes for the, I said that the program is open to all the research field, and you must know that we really do take care, here we distribute very much among all the research field. We do not focus only on natural science, for example. And regarding the outcomes of this program, all the researchers told us that it ends in co-publications and often on the organization of international congress. So a part of the funding we provide every year, we also have built very strong partnerships, mostly to promote young researchers. And so the first partnership we have for years now is with la Fondation L'Oréal. So we are very happy to join L'Oréal because this is a program here to promote young Canadian scientist women. So you must know that if you are applying to a program, it is important for you to know that the Canadian researcher, if you have a young woman scientist within your team who's going to be part of the FCRF program, you can also apply to this scholarship because every year we give access to 2 awards of $5,000. We also partnered with Mitacs. So as Brian just explained it to you, you must know that if you're a laureate of our program, you can have access to one of the Global Link grants. And the third partnership is with one of our founder 20 years ago, a minister in France, so the Ministère de l'Enseignement Supérieur, de la Recherche et de l'Innovation, who give you an amazing opportunity by giving you access to 3 doctorate contracts. So for those who don't know, one contract is the equivalency of a 3-year salary for a PhD student. And this contract, this is the researcher in France who must ask about it because it's available for PhD students in France. So like I mentioned earlier, this program is managed simultaneously in Canada and France. So I am the main contact for the Canada part, and I am located at the University of Ottawa. So please feel free to contact me or the French Embassy in Canada, and we will answer any of your questions regarding our program. We also have a website, so you will find information, including the deadline, for example, for the call for proposal and all the guides. So I gave you a very quick overview of our program. So I invite anybody who wants to have more detail to join us during the next breakout rooms. And I will be happy to answer any of your questions. But for now, I will give the mic to Yann Matas, who's going to introduce you the research landscape in France. So thanks for listening, and Yann, the floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup, Clotilde. Je vais partager mon écran. Merci beaucoup, merci à EURAXESS et à l'université Simon Fraser University pour m'inviter à cet événement. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Hello everybody. I will give a very short presentation about the French National Center for Scientific Research, and to explain you that it's an important, or try to convince you that it's an important player for the France-Canada research cooperation. It will sort of complete the presentation that we have heard previously, and it will show the diversity of the tools that are there for the EU-Canada cooperation. Before I start, I just wanted also to say and underscore that we were talking about talents, we were talking about ideas. It's really an important aspect of the cooperation, and I would add a friendship between the researchers on the both sides of the Atlantic. And so let me start with this short speech of CNRS and its position within the French higher education and research landscape. There are 2 major pillars within France. There are on one side the universities and grandes écoles, and on the other side there are research organizations. Sorry, I'm having a sort of feedback on the sound. Maybe Clotilde, if you can turn off your microphone. So there are 2 major pillars: the universities and grandes écoles, and the research organizations. Of course, the universities having students, PhD students, associate professors, and professors who are doing or are involved within the teaching and the higher education. And some of them are doing research. Most of them are doing research. And which is important to understand, is that there are 3 different types of research laboratories. There are research laboratories that are uniquely associated with universities that we are calling équipe d'accueil. There are research universities that are uniquely associated with these research organizations that we are calling Unité Propre de Recherche, UPR, and there are research laboratories. They are matching both research organizations and universities, and you can find within these what we call Unité Mixte de Recherche researchers that are coming from universities and researchers that are coming from the research organizations. That's where the mix is coming into the play. And it is important to understand the significant role of these UMRs on the French landscape. And it's the UMR, that's where the most of the research is being done. So CNRS is one of the research organizations. It's actually the largest publicly funded research organization in the European Union. And it has about 1,000 research and multidisciplinary research laboratories across the France, mainland and overseas. And as I explained on the previous slide, 96% of those are these UMRs, these Unités Mixtes de Recherche. So it's important to understand when you work with somebody in France, what kind of lab is the person is involved and whether it is involved with the UMR. So CNRS is different from NRC, and CNRS is not a funding agency, but it has the partnership with different universities, and I have put some logos of the major partners on the bottom part. Just few figures, and we can talk about this a little bit later. There are 32,000 people. There are 3.3 billion euros of annual budget. And the internationalization and innovation is really top priorities of the CNRS. There are different tools for the international collaboration, and I put here the spectrum of the different tools that are possible, and you can see there are a number of them in Canada. It's a spectrum in the sense that those tools are supported by the CNRS in partnership with the host institutions, and the objective is to provide leverage opportunities for more substantial funding projects, and including the European Union. And I will end with this last slide showing the tools that are distributed in Canada. You can see that they are mostly in Vancouver, in Alberta, in Ontario, and in Quebec. And I'm open to more discussions and to more questions during the breakout session. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, Clotilde and Jean. And now is the time to open up the floor for questions. I remind you that you still have time to send us your questions by using the chat box on the side menu. Let me start with our first question, and this, I guess, it's directed to all our presenters. What impact the pandemic has had on research exchange between Canada and Germany and Canada and France? I will add another part of the question, and it's how can we make sure to maintain the momentum and ensure that we continue collaborating in the following months and years? Who wants to take it first? Jean-Paul, I see you're telling me
face.
that you want to take this one.
Sure. Well, it's had a massive impact initially. DAAD is, so I can speak from a DAAD perspective as to what sort of ramifications it's had here and how we've responded. So we had a number of, obviously, program cancellations, suspensions. DAAD is a large organization, highly bureaucratic, and not known for its nimble response to challenges, I think it's safe to say. And I will confess to being absolutely gobsmacked at just how flexible DAAD has proven to be in this situation. And I don't know if that holds true for other institutions. I can say from DAAD's perspective, we have done all we can to see that our grantees are able to keep their funds, defer the receipt of those funds, etc. There are limitations to just how flexible we can be, but I can honestly say that to the extent that we are able, we are working with our grantees to ensure that they don't lose the funds. There has been some accommodation for online activities insofar as that's equivalent or close to. It is not what we want to see. We do want to see physical mobility, but recognizing the ongoing nature of the challenge, that's something that we are increasingly incorporating into the programs and trying to respond in that way. So that would be sort of the thumbnail of what we've done.
Well, I would yeah, sorry. I would just say exactly the same. I'm just impressed how Canada and Europe adapt to this situation. So we can apply when you are actually working internationally. You have to look either the legislation in Europe and in Canada, and definitely I think you know that most of the university in Canada just forbid any traveling, because at the beginning France were very open. Now it's closed, but I want just to say again that when it comes to our program, it's exactly the same. Nobody's going to lose the grants. We just adapt and we just wait, because it's a 2-year program, and I just want to assure people that you can still apply, because the program will start as soon as we can travel again.
Thank you. I think, Jan, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, if I may, I wanted just to add 2 things. What I said at the beginning of my presentation, that there was one of the ingredients was the friendship between the researchers. And because the research cooperations between France and Canada, between Europe and Canada, are based on the friendship between researchers, so there was of course an impact, but on the form, but not on the content, and it will survive, and it will be maybe even strengthened in the future. And the other thing that what I wanted to say is that, of course, it's also somehow impacted the different ways of collaboration. But, for example, for the CNRS, the fundamental research will prevail. And we have seen that the fundamental research was really incredibly important. And if we now talk about the vaccines that have been developed over the past 12 months, it's because there was years and years of fundamental research and international cooperation.
You're right, Jan, and there's a lot of pressure to focus now on short-term impact, but now after this pandemic, we're seeing the value of fundamental research. Brian, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just maybe 5 seconds, because I know we're running short on time, but from a Mitacs perspective, the pandemic had obviously a very big effect on our programs, especially our summer GRI program. So we were expected to bring about 1,300 students to Canada this past summer alone, and we had to essentially defer that program by a year. But what I can say in terms of echoing the sentiments from a lot of my colleagues on the line is that our international partners were extremely collaborative in understanding and re-engaging with Mitacs and committing to sort of expanding our portfolio of funding for the future in order to account for this change. Fortunately, we also have some built-in flexibilities as well, where we can sort of defer travel for approximately a year in sort of better conditions for travel as well. But it goes without saying that in order for us to make this work, we needed input from our key international partners to do this with us, and overwhelmingly the response was extremely positive on that front.
And hopefully we can receive the GRIs, because every year they bring a lot of energy to our universities. So we're going to move to the next question, and this is for John Paul. Someone in the audience is asking, can we apply for multiple DAAD programs within the same calendar year?
Yes, the short answer is that's not a problem. You can apply for as many of the programs as you wish. You may not receive funding from 2 programs simultaneously. So that's not a problem.
Excellent. Our next question is for Brian. Which European Union programs, Mitacs programs, are linked to the in addition to the MCCA rights already mentioned? If any are linked, I assume they are linked to these MCAC rights.
Right. So we don't have any additional Mitacs programs that are linked to any additional programs that are managed by the European Union beyond what I just mentioned. But of course, we have programs that are linked to existing programs managed by countries within the European Union. So just to make that distinction, I hope that clarifies the answer, Julio.
And along the same lines, this question is also for you, Brian, and taking advantage, you mentioned that we have another question that is very similar. Right. Does Mitacs provide full 6,000 Canadian dollars on top of the MCCA funding?
Yes, if the project is deemed eligible, the recipients of the funding portfolio from the MSCA RISE program are encouraged to apply to Mitacs, and then, you know, as long as they successfully submit the application and it's reviewed, Mitacs will provide a top-up of $6,000 to that applicant. So yes, the full $6,000 on top of existing MCSA RISE funding as well.
Thank you, Brian. This question came a few times. Clotilde, this is for you. Is it possible for other Canadian universities to join the consortium of 20 universities of the France-Canada Fund, Research Fund?
Yeah, so we are open. Just 20 years ago, 16 universities were part, and 20 years after, we are 20. So it's very selective, but we are still open to have more university. So I really encourage you to contact me. And but the thing is quite simple. It's actually every time a university contact me, so I ask to really do a letter of intention and showing their the excellence of their research within their own establishment. Because once I gather information on the university, I give all the detail to the executive committee. And this is the executive committee who will make the decision on if they accept this new university. Just a big information. It just, of course, you can try to, you can reach us, but you need that, you have a member fee to be, okay, to join the FCRF. So just to be clear, a new university has to pay $60,000. Okay, so it's once, so we can make two payments, but it's once for, and once it's done, you're a member of the FCRF for life. Okay, but it's good to know that you have a member fee here. But it's not because you want to join that you will definitely be a part. It's upon the executive committee who will make the decision.
Perfect. Thank you, Clotilde. We have one more question from the audience, and it's also, I guess this is for Clotilde also. Are there any discussion or plan to establish a common or coordinated program with the Canadian Tri-Council, similar to the previous collaboration between Agence Nationale de Recherche, ANR, and...
Yes. So no, sorry, I can read the question. No. We don't work with l'ANR, l'Agence Nationale de Recherche in France. We don't work with them. You must know that the NSERC is definitely a member of our executive committee, but we don't have this for now collaboration with the Tri-Council. We work with NSERC, we work with Mitacs, but this is not on the discussion for now.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and this is going to be for Jan. Very quickly, why did CNRS and l'Université de Lyon decided to establish a joint satellite office in Canada? I mean, there are many countries, and then you decided to come to Canada.
Okay, I didn't have time to explain that. Thank you very much for this question. Of course, the internationalization means to have an international strategy, and I showed you that the CNRS is having partnership with different universities, and it appears that CNRS and University of Lyon has shared the strategy to strengthen the cooperation with Canada, and in order to strengthen it, they decided to open a representative office and to have somebody to make the go-between and to help to facilitate the cooperation between two countries.
Thank you, Jan. And unfortunately, we don't have more time for questions. It was a pleasure to hearing from you. I would like to thank all our presenters today, and I will turn the microphone to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julio, for that second session. Let me get started for the last part of our activity and therefore the end of ERD 2020. So thank you to the great speakers as well. This final part of the day will be the breakout sessions. As I close out our activities here on the main stage, I want to let you know that later today we'll be sending you a brief survey by email. So please do keep in mind right now and throughout the breakout sessions any feedback you may have for us and what your thoughts have been about this two-day event. These earlier panels have all been recorded, and we'll follow up to share those with you as soon as they're available. And finally, I'd like to thank Simon Fraser University and all of our excellent speakers for making ERD 2020 so great. We encourage you to keep in touch with SFU and EURAXESS North America, and I'll share in the chat right now some links to two upcoming events we're hosting in December: the annual meeting of the European Scientific Diasporas in North America on December 10th, and a webinar on European science diplomacy and the pandemic on December 16th. So we hope to see you there. I'm sharing those links, and join me right now in moving over to a breakout session and speaking with our panelists. You'll be able to hop back and forth, ask your questions, interact with them for the next hour. So with that, thank you so much and enjoy.